welcome back. This is lesson 3 of the Dynamic WordPress course for beginners. In this lesson, we're going to go ahead to build out the design of our very first page. We're going to be building out our home page of our website. And if you recall, in the previous lesson, we talked about our fonts and our colors and getting our design system up and going. And in this lesson, we're going to be putting that to good use. I want to show you what I did between our last lesson and this one. And what I have here is a simple wireframe of the website I intend to build. It's a simple use of square boxes and circles and rectangles to kind of just give a visual representation of how the final design is going to look like. And for many people, they use a tool such as Figma, which I'm currently making use of. You can also download Figma and make use of it for free, or you can use your pen and paper and sketch this out on a book. It's entirely your choice. But this is what I chose to do. So I have here, inside of my sketch here, I have the logo, which I represented with a square. I have the navigation items at the top here. We're going to talk about that in a bit. We also have here what we call the hero section, the very first section on the page. And here, inside of here, you have maybe a big, huge title or something, a call out, whatever that we put inside of here. We'll have a circle, maybe representation of the image of the person for whom we're building this portfolio website. And if you scroll down here, you also have a section here with a heading, and it has inside of here maybe projects that this person has previously worked on, represented by what we have inside of here. And if you scroll down, you also have this section that will show this person's, maybe his past experiences displayed inside of a section such as this. And if you scroll down here, you have another section here that will also show maybe a form, anyone who comes on this person's website to be able to fill that form and contact this person. And down here, maybe a list of all of the blog posts that the person who owns the website has written down here. And finally, you have the footer of the website. Of course, you remember, as I talked about before, this part here is the header where you have the logo of the person and the navigation items at the very top. And at the bottom right here is the footer of the website. We're also going to be building that. If you look down here, probably what we'll have here is maybe the logo again, some information about the person, a button that a person can click on to contact the owner of the website, some navigation items at the bottom, and finally the copyright information at the bottom. You know that stuff they write, all rights reserved, copyright, whatever the current year. That's where we put it down below there. Okay, now we know how the structure of the website is going to be. I took the liberty to do this to just kind of save us time and also give us, visual representations of how things are going to look. Remember, this course is to introduce you to dynamic WordPress development. So whatever we talk about here as it relates to design, I'm going to leave the design aspect for you to majorly decide on. I'm not going to discuss too much about what design principles to follow or what design areas, what colors a person can choose. I'm going to majorly focus on how you can build out the page, and whatever your design choices are in the future, you sure can implement that yourself. All you need to do is follow the principles and not just the layouts that I'm showing right here. So I wireframe the simple layouts for myself here, and you can follow me as we build this out from top to bottom. Let's come back now to our web page, and if you recall, this is where we left off. We have our home page right here with all of the heading widgets displayed right there on the page, and we laid them out there so that we can tell how each of the heading sizes are going to look, how big they're going to be, what their font is going to be, what our colors are going to be, as we discussed in the previous lesson, right? You remember? Good. Now we can come back inside of the home page by just simply clicking on Edit with Elementor right there at the top. And when we're inside the home page right here, what we want to do now is delete or remove this current container inside of which all of these items exist. Now, why do we want to do that? Because this is not what we need on our homepage. We need to build out what is finally going to be on our homepage. Remember, we only have these things here just because we wanted to lay out our design system. So what we're going to do right now is just click on the X icon on this container right here. You can either do that or click on this structure panel icon that you see at the top left here. So clicking on it, as you can see, toggles open and close the structure panel right here, which essentially shows you all of the items, all of the widgets, every single element that you have put on this current page. So as you can see, that's the container. We can open it by collapsing it just like this, and you have all of the elements inside of here. Selecting the element inside of the structure panel will also select it right here on the page. You can choose to use a structure panel, or you can select the item directly by clicking on it inside of the canvas right here. So remember, what we wanted to do was to right-click on container and click on delete. We can either do that or click on the close icon that you see here, which will essentially delete that container along with all of what we'll call the children elements of that particular container. So let's just delete that container and everything is gone. As you can see, we have a clean slate to begin from. However, there are aspects of this page that are still visible to us and they are not inside of the structure panel, such as what you see at the top here where it says test website, which is essentially inside of the header template of this particular page. We're going to talk about that in a bit. However, you have another aspect of this our page here where you have homepage, and that homepage title you see there is actually the title of this current page, the page we're currently editing. It's pulled in from the current theme, right? Because we installed a blank theme, you remember? It has no design specifications coming along with it, but it has some particular structural elements such as this, such as the page title that comes along with the theme. So we can override that by clicking on these page settings at the top right here. Once we click on it, inside of page layout, we want to select Elementor full width. Now, what's that going to do is that everything on this page that is fetched from the theme is going to be taken away. And the entire page from where you have just below the header right here, all the way to before the footer is where you have this all right reserved. Somewhere inside of here is the footer. So every single aspect of the body within the header and the footer is now available to be designed or developed with the use of Elementor just by selecting Elementor full width. And that's what it is, right? If you want to affect even the header and the footer, you can still come inside of that page settings, and instead of Elementor full width, you can select Elementor canvas. And in such a case, the header and the footer will also disappear, right? But that's not what we want. We want to be able to design the Elementor full width, which is the middle part between the header and the footer, and leave the header and the footer the exact way they are. Once you select any of that, the page is going to reload and you're going to have the current settings that you can work with. Is it clear so far? I want to be sure that you understand what I've discussed so far. If you have, don't worry, at whatever point you are watching in this video, just leave a comment saying, I totally get it. And when you do leave that, I'm going to be confirming that you actually do understand. All right, good. Have you done that? Excellent. We can move on now. We can click on publish. And if we come to the front end here and just refresh this, what do we have? We have a completely blank website, just the header and the footer here where we have all rights reserved and nothing in between. That's okay. And that's what we need for our homepage right now, because we want to start building the content of that homepage. I want to start from the header, and to design that, we want to come back to our dashboard here. We want to come inside of templates, as you can see right here, and we want to click on theme builder. And when we click on theme builder, notice now that you can customize every aspect of your site, such as what? Such as the header, which I talked about just now, and such as the footer. If you try to edit the header right now, you will see that it's locked behind a paywall, and you will need to upgrade your subscription to a Pro subscription, just as I said when we first installed Elementor Pro, in order for us to do this. And meaning that you have to be subscribing a certain amount every year, if you so desire, in order to have this feature open. So just to design your header and your footer and every other aspects that you see here, you will absolutely need to upgrade. But there is a way out of this, a way that is a lot cheaper in the long run for you. And I'm going to show you the smart choice that I made sometime in 2021, and I haven't ever needed to pay a dime since then. And what did I do? I installed another plugin produced by a company called Crocoblock. That's the company on whose channel you're currently watching this video right now. And I used that plugin. Of course, there is a lifetime deal where you just buy it once and you don't have to pay a subscription. You can use the link in the description below if you want to make this same smart choice that I made sometime in 2021. But I'm going to show you just how I got this done. So I went to the Crocoblock website, and on the Crocoblock website, there is a plugin that's called JetThemeCore. And inside of it, you have a theme builder built specifically as a substitute for that function of Elementor Pro. Although if you have Elementor Pro, just to be clear, they're going to work side by side. They're going to work together. But with this plugin, you absolutely do not need the theme builder functionality of Elementor Pro. So what I chose to do was to buy all of the plugins that they have inside of the suite here. They have Jet Engine. As you can see, there's JetThemeCore here, but there's also Jet Elements, Jet Smart Filters, Jet Wool Builder, Jet Search. There is a lot. There is a lot of these plugins right here. If you want to, you can use the link in the description below to get to the pricing page right here. And you can either choose to pay per year, or you can either choose one of the 2 lifetime deals right now, and you can own this plugin and get unlimited updates lifetime. If you choose to make the smart choice to purchase any of the plans here, for me, I purchased the lifetime plan. You can find the link in the description below. Just make sure to use the code that you see right now on your screen, which is going to give you 5% off any plan that you choose. However, this is not a marketing video. I'm going to go right back to teaching you what I intend to teach you. All right, just follow me. If you're not ready to make the decision right now, it's totally okay. Just understand how things work and you can make that decision sometime in the future. Let's come back to my Crocoblock account. I have already made this purchase, as I said before, sometime in 2021. And right here, I can download the plugins that I have access to. Remember, I told you in lesson 1 that in order for you to make use of certain plugins that are not on the WordPress repository, you need to be able to download the file provided to you by whoever sells the plugin to you, right? In this case, there are 2 steps. Step number 1 is to come inside of your account here, and inside of JetThemeCore, which you can see here, is just one of the very many plugins you're going to get for one price. You can click on download right here. And if you click on download, you have the file downloaded right now. You can then come inside of your dashboard, and you want to come inside of plugins. When you come to plugins, you want to click on add new plugin. When you click on add new plugin right now, you'll be able to drag what you just downloaded and install it. So I want to click on upload plugin. When I click on that, I have this place opened up, and I can just come inside of the downloads right here and drag that inside of here. Once I drag that in, I can click on install now. And what it's going to do is just install the plugin I just downloaded. And then after that is done, I'm just going to click on activate plugin. Once the plugin is activated, I can then activate the license that I have purchased on the main website, because anybody can have access to these files, but you need a license to be able to make use of it. It's the same format that Elementor Pro uses. This is just a different approach, a smarter way to get this done. Now, on the dashboard page, you can see you have a new dashboard item. Remember, when you install a plugin or a theme, they can change what you see on your dashboard menu right here. As you can see here, you have a new Crocoblock menu item right here, and you also have the ability to enter your license. So when I click on license right now, I can come back inside my Crocoblock account. I can scroll up all the way here to purchase details, and I want to click on view details. When I click on view details, it will reveal to me what my license key is. And then I can use that license key to activate the plugin that I have just installed. So I have copied my license to my clipboard. All I want to do now is come inside of here and activate that license. I want to paste my license right there by just pasting it right there and clicking on activate license. And then it's going to go through and activate my license. So I'm just going to give it a moment to activate the license. And once this is activated, you see, congratulations, your license has been activated. You also see that I have a Crocoblock all-inclusive lifetime membership right there for all of my websites, whatever number of websites I intend to use this on. And it comes with all of these plugins included at a lifetime deal. This is very, very good. Now, what it means is that I can now make use of the single plugin that I have installed here. So I can close this out. Let's close this out too. And now I have JetThemeCore ready to be used. Good. This is very, very good. Now, if you take a look at inside of Crocoblock, you see you also have here theme builder, which is excellent because right now it means that I can begin to affect many areas of my website without using the Elementor Pro subscription. So let's click on theme builder right now. And inside of here, I can begin to build out various aspects of my website. Right now, what you can see may be something that looks a little bit too overwhelming for you to understand, but I don't want you to be confused. Let's just focus on what's important for now. The fact is that what it shows here is just a kind of map to map out very many areas of your website. So what I can do is to come back to grid view just so that it's not too complicated for me to look at by just clicking on grid view right here. We're going to talk about tree view sometime later on. Don't worry. You're going to understand it. It's pretty simple to understand. But for now, let's just click on grid view. We're going to come back to this simple, nice looking page. Okay, great. Now I can click on create new page template. It's going to ask me what the condition for adding that template is. And here I'm going to say add condition, and I'm going to say we want this included in the entire site, as you can see right here. So it means whatever is going to be my header template right now is going to affect everywhere on my website. That's what we want, right? Good. Now we're going to click on create. Once we click on create, you see this page template has now been created. So we can call this entire site template. Something like that should be fine. We now want to select override theme header, which is what you see here. So it's going to override the theme header. That's the header, which comes as part of the default theme. If we come back to the main page right here, you see that's the default theme header that comes with our theme. We want to page build now and override that. So we're just going to click on the plus icon by override theme header, and we want to click on create template. Now, once we click on create new template, it asks what kind of template content editor do we want to use? We can choose to use the default block editor of WordPress, which is great for writing content. Some people use it to build websites, don't get me wrong. But in this case, because we chose the page builder Elementor, we can make use of that. So we're just going to select Elementor right here and select the template name for that particular Elementor template we're building out. This template, we can call that site-wide header. You can just call it that. And why are we calling it that? Because this is a header we want to use everywhere on our website. Just call it a name that works in your own case. Now we can proceed by clicking on create. Now take note, once we click on create, the template has been created. What template has been created? A header template created on Elementor. We can go right now to the editor and begin to edit that header template by just simply clicking on go to editor. Or we can close this out and notice what happens here is that what we added here as our site-wide header has now been added as the header of this template. So we're good to go. A way for us to begin to edit that template is to click on this pencil icon right here, and we'll begin to edit the content of that header template. Okay, we can do that right now. But first of all, let's remind ourselves of what we really need. If you come to the front end here and refresh this, take a look at where you have test websites. You see it's gone, right? Why? Because we just created a header template and right now it is completely empty. Let's come back right here inside of the editor and you're back here where you can begin to design what will be your header template, right? Great. Now you can click on the plus icon here and let's just, for the sake of just demonstrating this, just pick one of these two options. We're going to talk about Flexbox and Grid somewhere down the line, but for now, let's just test that this is actually working. Let's just pick any of the options right here. We can pick any of the structures right here. It really doesn't matter. We'll talk about that. But we can go right ahead and click on add element and let's just drag again a header widget of whatever kind that we want to drag in here. And we can just type whatever we want to type in right here. In fact, we can leave it exactly the way it is and just click on publish. Now, once we click on publish, we can come to the front end. Let's try to refresh that and see that the header template works. There it is. You can see that the header template works because what we just edited inside of the header template and conditioned it to work throughout the website is working right now. So this is good. It means we can go right ahead to build our header. Okay. So let's, as we did before, remove this by just clicking on the X icon right there. let's come back to our Figma file and see what we need to build inside of our header. So this is the Figma file right here. And again, this is what makes up the header template, right? This part at the very top right here is what makes up the header. So we can go ahead now to build out that header. Now, just take note of a few things. First off, you have the logo, which is going to serve as the, identifying mark of this entire website. And usually people like to put their logo in the header template. And why? Because it kind of gives a person direction, right? So someone comes on your website, they need to know first who you are, right? And your logo is your brand identity. So usually you would see people put their logo in their header. They would also generally put it in their footer if they so desire, right? And then you would also have kind of like a direction of how they can navigate your site, which is generally called the navigation, right? Or a menu, as WordPress calls it. Now, inside of this, you would have different links that will link people to different aspects of your own website. So really what we need here is just to ensure that we have both our logo and our menu or navigation carrying all of the links to the various aspects or the various locations of our website. So we can do that. Let's come back inside of Elementor right now, and we're going to click again on Add New Container. Now, keep in mind, a container is just what the name implies that it is. It is a container. It holds or groups your content. A number of elements that you put inside of a container are grouped as one. So it's kind of like a group if you've worked with something like Figma in the past, right? So when you create a container, what you're essentially creating is a group of elements that are grouped together and can be manipulated as one, okay? Now, if that sounds confusing, you're going to understand just why I said what I just said, okay? Now, when you create a container, you have two options. You have either a Flexbox container or a Grid container. Now, Flexbox and Grid are two very, very important aspects of web design in CSS, to be very specific. Now, CSS is the programming language for designing your web pages to ensure that they look and feel the way you want them to. And you could have on your mind a question right now. So why aren't we working with CSS? It's because essentially what we're doing when we build with a page builder like this is that we're both building out the structure, and whatever design that we make to those elements right here on the page, what is happening really behind the scenes is that it's writing for you the code of HTML, which determines the structure of the web page, and CSS, which determines the design of the web page. So it means, therefore, that sometimes in the course of designing a website like this, you will come in contact with terminologies that are associated with the language of CSS, right? And so in order for us to understand those, sometimes we need to do extra research so that we can understand the basic principles behind it, especially if we do not have a background in coding. Well, that doesn't mean that if you do not know the language of CSS that you would actually not be able to design a web page, because as you're about to find out, you can do it without knowing CSS, okay? So, Flexbox, Grid, which one do we choose? The answer will vary depending on the layout. However, you will hear very many people in different communities of WordPress and web design in general that some people are very, very adamant on using just Flexbox. Others are very adamant on using just Grid. But I believe that they have different areas where they shine, depending again on the structure of the web page. Now, there certainly will be times when I will make use of Grid right here, and someone will say, no, you could have done that with Flexbox. And truthfully, they're almost always right. Flexbox is just a different layout structure than Grid is. You're going to find out as we proceed in this designing. Now, you could make the choice to use either Flexbox or Grid, and in general, that will entirely be your choice, all right? But just keep in mind something that could help you make such decisions when they come. Flexbox, when it was released, was created to help you design things in one dimension, meaning you can stack items in columns, or you can stack items in rows. You cannot do both at the same time. However, Grid helps you stack items both in columns and in rows, right? And that's the major difference. But again, your decision to make use of any of these layouts will be entirely your choice. You just need to play around with them and see how each of these layouts function. I'm going to use both in different situations right here. So for the header, let's take a look at how the Figma file is presented here. We're just going to come back to the Figma file, and here is what we take note of. First, we notice that there is one huge section right here, or a container. And we're going to talk about sections and containers sometime in a bit, but just take note, there is one big container right here, all right? Great. Now we know that because once we highlight it in Figma, we see that is the one full container right here. I'm just going to scroll a bit up so we can see what we're looking at. Great. Now you see inside of that container, we have a logo, and then we have a menu here. The menu carries, all the navigation items, okay? Now let's try to replicate that design inside of Elementor. We're just going to come back here, and here, let's select grid. We're just going to click on grid, and you can see you have different grid structures. You can see you have 2 column layouts just like this, 1 and 2. You have a 2 row layouts just like this. You have a 3 column layout. I mean, whatever you select as your structure here, just keep in mind you can very, very easily update the structure, change it to whatever you want. It's your choice entirely, okay? These are just visual representations to help you get started quite quickly, okay? Now let's use a 2 column layout right here. And what do you notice? You notice you have inside of the structure panel, you have a grid, which is essentially a container, right? A grid container. And inside of that, if we collapse that, we just open that up, you see it's empty. Oh, hold on. Aren't we seeing 2 border outlines inside of this? Well, they're just visual representations. And as you can see on the left-hand side here, you can toggle it off so that the grid outlines don't show up. If we toggle it back on, you see you have, those outlines to just outline where you can add stuff to, okay? You have the ability to set how far wide you want this to be. By default, it's going to be the default width selection of the device that you're currently viewing. For example, we're currently on desktop, so you see the width selection here as it is grayed out right now is 1140. And that is, of course, because, as I mentioned to you before, you can change that inside of the settings and you can adjust that for different device sizes, right? So that's the width. The minimum height here is just what the name says it is. It says min height, which means minimum height. You can adjust that. You can just drag the slider right here. And as you can see, it adjusts the height of that particular container, okay? Now, to undo that, let's just select the number that has been created by virtue of us dragging that slider and just click on backspace and it resets it to regular. And by default, regular means 0. There is nothing inside of the minimum height right there. But it looks like there is something in it. No, there isn't. This is just the visual representation so that we know that we can click the plus here and add stuff to it. You can see right here inside of the structure panel, it is empty. Now with grid, now this is where it gets different from Flexbox. You can select your number of columns. So you can specify if you want 3 columns. And as you can see, you now have 3 columns here. If you turn off the grid outline again, you don't visually see the grid column, but it does help to keep it toggled on, okay? Now, you can select this, you can increase this to 10 columns. This is entirely your choice how you want this to be. So as I said before, those visual representations of each of those structures were just to help you get up to speed, right? So let's return this back to 2 columns. And why? Because we know right here that we have 1 column on the right here to help us to contain our logo and the other column on the right here. Because here we see we have 1 column on the left here to help us contain our logo and the other column on the right here to help us contain our menu item. If we come back inside of Figma here, we see that on the right we have the logo. And I took the liberty of designing a very beautiful logo right here because in case I did not mention to you, this website I have chosen to give the person who we're building a portfolio for right now, I've chosen to call him a name, and his name is Fiction. Not fiction as you think it is spelled, but fiction as it is spelled like this. In fact, you know what? I'm going to change the site name right now. Let's go inside of general. We're just going to click on general right here. Inside of there, we want to adjust what the site name is. And remember, the site name is what shows right here inside of the header template test website, which we added before. But now we're going to come inside of general right here, and we're going to call it the name of the person who owns this fictional website. So we're going to call it fiction. How about that? You like it, right? Great. So we're going to come down here to save. And after saving that, we're going to come inside of the website again. Now we can decide inside of here to add that logo. We can download that logo right here. Now I'm just going to come back inside of the website because I already do have that exported so that I can add that right here. So I'm just going to click on the plus icon right here. And what do I want to drag in inside of here? I want to drag in this image widget right here. Just going to put the image widget right there. And of course, you see the image widget has nothing in it. So I'm just going to click on choose image. I'm going to come to upload files here, click on select files here, and then pick the logo I already have saved on my computer. Now that I have that uploaded, I can then come inside of alt text here and just type in a description of what that image is. Especially if the image I uploaded to the website, as you can see here, is not purely decorative, meaning if it's just not an image that you just put in the site to help, add some design aesthetics to the site, but it's actually an image that you want people to be able to know about, people, especially those who have assistive devices, people who have visual impairment or need some assistive aid in order to understand your website, they rely on stuff like alt text, right? Although it's not going to be visible in the front end of your website, but it's going to assist them to understand exactly what is on your website's page. So you need to enter an alt text. In my case here, I'm just going to enter logo of fiction. Logo of fiction, if I can spell fiction. And that's it. That should be all right. I mean, get descriptive as much as you want, but this, I believe, is going to be of assistance, okay? Now inside of title, I could also add a title for my image inside of there. I just want to type in the same thing, logo of fiction, okay? And once I'm done with that, I'm just going to click on select. Now when I click on select, what you notice is that what we've added there is right here on the web page. This is very, very good because right now we've entered the site logo and we can go ahead to design it, okay? And we can go ahead to make it look exactly the way we want it to look, okay? So for now, let's just leave that. Let's not talk about styling for now. We're just going to add the next element on the page. Now, as you can see that once we added something to the column on the left, we now have the opportunity to also add another element to the column on the right. And why? Because if we just come right here to click on add element here and just try to drag something like, let's say, a text editor widget right here, and we just drop it, here's where it goes, to the very next column on the right. And this is essentially how Grid works. It works as though you have a container of only one element allowed at a time, okay? And this is the one element that is allowed on the left, and whatever element you add just next to it is going to rush right into the next column. But you can decide to group elements, and you do that using containers because you can add unlimited number of containers, although you want to use that sparingly, but you can add unlimited number of containers inside of themselves. You can literally nest it. As you can see, as I added a container there, it just jumps, this text just jumps to the next line, right? Because why? It just keeps flowing one to the next. This is the first column. This is the second column. Also, this is the first row. This is the same first row. It just goes from right to left, jumping from one to the other, right? This is how Grid works, okay? Now, you can decide to just put in the logo right there. And once you put the logo inside of the container, see what happens? The container now comes inside of the first column right here. As you can see, there are two elements right now, the container and the text. And inside of the container, you also have the image right there. So if you want to, you can use the structure panel right here to just drag this element inside of that container, right? And as you can see, it becomes part of that one single container, as though it is one element right there. You understand? This is how you essentially group things. You can group things if you don't want them flowing to the next column on the right or in the row beneath them. You can all group it inside of one container. I hope you get this. I'm hoping you absolutely do, because this will serve as a foundation for the rest of all of the design pages that we have to implement. Okay? So let's go right ahead with this. We absolutely did not want to add in a text widget right here. What we needed to add in was a menu widget. So we're just going to use the Control Z, which is going to undo and keep undoing until we have the opportunity to now delete the text editor. We're just going to click on delete for that. Now what is left to do here is just to click on this plus icon, which is going to open the element, and we want to type in here menu. And here we just want to drag in a menu widget that will help us to begin to add our navigation items. And as you can see, there is a padlock beside it. It says you need to upgrade just to get that. So of course, here again, Crocoblock to the rescue. You just want to come back here. As included as part of your original subscription is also the Jet menu plugin right here. You can see it right here. All you need to do is download that plugin too. And that will give you the menu option that is currently behind a Pro paywall. Keep in mind, these are not just clones of what Elementor Pro gives you. They're better and advanced features. This course is for people who want to build dynamic, interactive websites, and not just for the regular person who is looking to build a brochure website, right? So these plugins are a lot more sophisticated. They help you do a whole lot more. We can come back inside of the website right now and want to come inside of plugins, because remember, when you download a plugin from a website such as crocoblock.com or any other website where you purchase a plugin from, you just need to come to where the plugin exists and you want to drag that inside of plugins here. So once you click on add new plugin, you want to click on upload plugin. You want to upload that right here. Once you drag that in, you want to click on install now, and that will go ahead to install the Jet menu plugin, yet another plugin by Crocoblock that does amazing stuff. In future tutorials, you're probably going to learn more. There are still tutorials right here on this channel that talk about this plugin and how it is used to do even better things. So for now, let's just click on activate plugin. We're just going to activate the Jet menu plugin that we downloaded there, and there we have it right now on our website. There are two ways to install this, just so you know. Crocoblock has provided a very simple way for us to install plugins that we need to be installed on our website without having to go back and forth between your Crocoblock account and your own website. You can right here on your own website, just come to the Crocoblock dashboard. When you come to Crocoblock and you want to click on dashboard here. And when you click on dashboard, it's going to load all of the plugins that you have available for you to download. And then you can begin to select and download them. You see, you can install 17 more plugins with your license. If you click on install now, you're just going to see a list of all of the plugins that you have available to be downloaded. And clicking on install here will do essentially what we just did. Download and bring it into your website, but without you having to download to your computer and begin to upload that later. Okay, good. I digress. We were talking about menu. If we come back inside of the editor right now, we can just come back inside of here. For now, let's click on publish so that we do not lose our changes, because what we want to do is we want to update or refresh the editor right here so that it brings in all of the new widgets that the plugin comes with. Now, if we refresh that and we check again inside of the left panel right there where we have all of the widgets, we should see additional widgets that came along with this plugin, and that can help us to do what is locked behind the Pro subscription of Elementor Pro. If we click on plus here and we come inside of here and just search for menu, now you see a number of other options. You see here you have vertical mega menu, you have mega menu, and you also have hamburger menu, which is something like what Crocoblock currently has on their website. I could just give you a rundown of what each of these things does. As you can see here, you have something like a hamburger menu right here. If you hover over it, you have, a number of things dropping down from there. If you hover over this one, for example, you see you have a number of things inside of here, right there inside of the navigation or the menu. So this is kind of like how a mega menu functions, right? And Crocoblock gives you the opportunity to do just that. Okay, So we can drag in the mega menu. We don't need to make use of all of the functions right here, but this will certainly get us to a very good start. Once you drag it inside of here, you see that you need to select a menu, and a menu from where? If you click on publish now and you come back into the WordPress dashboard and you come inside of appearance here, you see under the options inside of appearance, you have something here called menus. If you open that, let's just open that in a new tab, we can begin to create our navigation items. This is what's going to tell where to go on your website. So you can select if a person can go to the home page or go to the about page or the search pages, right? So we can very easily manage our menu right here. And inside of here, we can just click on create menu to create a simple menu. So first we need to give our menu a name. We're just going to call this main navigation or whatever else you want to call it. This is entirely your choice. I cannot spell navigation, so I need to correct that. Good. Now we can click on create menu and it just creates the menu right there. Great. Now, once that is created, you have the opportunity to begin to add pages to that menu or post or whatever else you want to add inside of the menu to help people navigate around your website. But you take note that inside of here, if we come to pages, we have most recent pages. You have view all so that you can look at all of the pages on your website, which right now we just have home page and sample page. We can begin to add more pages and we're going to have those pages show up here and we'll be able to add those pages to our menu. So if we want to, we can just click on save menu for now, leave it empty. We can come back inside of pages here and just add a number of pages. These pages are pages that a person can go to on the website. So let's add a new page. The page we want to add first is maybe our about page. We have our home page. We have a sample page there that we probably are going to delete. We have the privacy policy page that is still a draft because we've not yet written our privacy policy page. So let's just write here about to create our next page and we can click on publish right here. Published. Good. We can come back to the WordPress dashboard by clicking on the WordPress logo right there and we can keep creating new pages just like that. If we want to, we can add another page here. Maybe we want to call this, what do you think? Maybe contact me, because we're dealing with a portfolio website and the person may need to be contacted on this website. So we can add that too. We can call that contact me. You can click on publish, publish again. It's published now. And if we come back to the dashboard, we have all these pages right here. For now, let's leave it as is. We're going to come back inside of menus here and we want to add all of the menu items that we just added as pages, right? So we're going to click on view all here. Right now, we don't see the updated list. We need to refresh so that the pages that we just created can show up inside of pages. Now come back to pages, click on view all again. You have homepage, about, contact me. Those should be fine. We can click on add to menu and we'll be able to go through these 3 pages, right? Now, once we're done with that, we can click on save menu. If we come back inside of the Elementor editor, again, we can check on the menu. We see there's nothing there. All we need to do is refresh so that it fetches, the updated lists of the menu that we just created. And then we can select that menu inside of here. Once we select it, we have the ability to also style how this menu item is going to look. So let's click on select menu here. Inside of menu, we're going to select main navigation as you see there on the left, which is what we called our menu when we created it, right? That's it right there. Okay. So we're back now inside of our Elementor editor and we see we have these 3 items right here. You see you have a bunch of settings that you can make changes to. You don't need to understand how all of them work right away, but what you need to do is to go through them on your own. Try to understand how each works by, just changing how things look. You can, just adjust things. You can say, hey, instead of the layout to be horizontal, let's change that to be vertical. Let's see how it looks. Oh, that's what vertical means. You get what I mean, right? So play around with this. See how things function. But for now, we're just going to style this the way it should work in our own case. So for now, we're going to leave the layout as horizontal because that exactly is what we have inside of our Figma file. We have a horizontal layout with the links, kind of wireframed inside of there for us. Okay, this is very good. But we noticed something here. In fact, we can just drag the structure panel down here so that we have more space to design at the top right there. Now, what we notice inside of here is two things. If we come back to the Figma file, here it is. We can just scroll. Let's just scroll to the left, see how things are arranged here. You can take note, in fact, if we just try to see how things are really laid out here. If we just highlight this, you can take note that inside of the container that you have right here, you have the logo and you have the menu items right here. But what you also notice is that the menu items that I wireframed here is vertically aligned to this, to the middle of this. As you can see, it's right in the middle of the container right there. So we need to find a way to do two things. One, we need to find a way to reduce the size of these image widgets right here. And two, we need to also adjust the layout of the menu right here so that it is, vertically aligned to the container right here. So let's take a look at that. If you come back inside of here right now, you can take note that if I select this image widget right here, I can adjust the image resolution, which is, the size, the actual size of that image in pixels, right? 1024 by 1024 just means 1024 pixels in width by 1024 pixels in height. If you come inside of here, you open the options, you have 768 pixels in width by 0 pixels in height. That 0 could mean that it could be whatever number of pixels in height, but as far as 768 pixels in width. But keep in mind that whatever you select inside of image resolution right here has to be either exactly the same or smaller than the actual resolution of the image. What does that mean? It means if we select choose image again, let's just select that again. And look at the image we chose, right? Look at the right-hand side of it right here. Forget about the dates and the size of the image. Right now, we're concerned with the pixels, as you can see right here. You see that the actual resolution of this particular logo is 203 by 203 pixels. So it's 200 pixels. That's the size, right? So if you select that image and you come here and select the image resolution to be 1024 by 1024, it will make no sense because you did not upload an image of that actual resolution, right? So because 200 is actually pretty small, you have a thumbnail here resolution. It's just called a thumbnail resolution. It's just a name given to that kind of resolution, 150 by 150. Now, see what happens when I select that. If I select 150 by 150, you see it gets smaller. But see what happens if I select 768, it gets bigger, yes, but it only got as big as 200 pixels, 203 pixels, which is the actual size of that image that we uploaded, right? And you can define that in whatever design tool that you use, like Figma or whatever. The actual resolution matters, right? And because these things generally define the file sizes, this is really small. This is about 3 kilobytes. But if you have a very large image of like 1024 pixels and it's not a single one color image or two color image like I showed here, if it's an image of a person and it's really big, it could get to megabytes, right? And this is not really good because then your website becomes slow and you kind of get frustrated yourself. So now select the image resolution that is smaller or equal to the image resolution that you have here. If you select a larger image resolution, it's just going to use the actual image resolution. Simple as that, okay? So in my own case, let's just select that as medium, or we can select thumbnail, which is 150 by 150. That's how small it can get for the physical size of this particular image. However, we can use our styling properties to increase the size of this image bigger than what the physical size in resolution actually is, right? And what does that mean? We can come inside of style right here and define the width differently. Let's say we want to define the width to be, let's think of a number, let's say 50 pixels. We're just going to select where we have this percentage value here. We can click on it and select a different unit type. Let's say we want to select pixels, and inside of width here, we want to say that this should be 50 pixels, right? You can see it's really small. We can increase that. So let's say that inside of here, we want to type in something like 500. But the actual resolution was actually 203, if you recall, right? So it means, therefore, that it is possible to use the style properties, in other words, CSS, to kind of expand this image or reduce this image beyond what the actual or below what the actual size, the physical size of that image is. And if you have not noticed already, this image has begun to do what is called pixelation, which is what you see around the edges here, where the image is no longer beautiful, it's starting to pixelate. You can literally start seeing the pixels that make up this whole 500 pixels written inside of here. You can almost begin to count all of the pixels right here, because those small boxes you see right there, those are pixels. What we need to do is ensure that this image is actually small, below the actual physical resolution of this particular image. So inside of width here, we could select something that will define the width of this image. And we do not want to set that as pixels. Instead of that, we want to set that instead as rem values. Now, of course, if you did your homework, you will understand why I'm selecting rem as against pixels. But just for those who were not able to do the homework, the fact is that I'm using rem because I want the logo size to also scale up or down depending on what the user browser's choice is. If the user is someone who likes big fonts and have already set those fonts inside of maybe their phone or inside of their computer, they've set what their font size should be, I want them to be able to come on the website that I have built, and the website will still respect the font size or whatever size that they selected, right? So in this case here, I'm just going to select rem. If I put inside of here 2 rem, this is how small it is. And in general, 2 rem is inside of Elementor, 2 rem is 32 pixels because 1 rem is 16 pixels, just like we said in the last lesson. Okay, so we go ahead right now and select our rem value, which is going to be our width. Right now, we're just going to eyeball it and play around with it. Let's try 3. That is okay, but maybe 3.5 will do the job. Will it do the job? I don't know. Maybe we can try 4. 4 appears to be okay. If we need to adjust this sometime in the future, we absolutely can do that. Now, you may notice something here, and this will take us back to talking about our grid container layout, okay? If you select this container right here by just clicking on the dots inside of the edit container, when you just click on that, you can see on the left-hand side here, you have the definition of the columns. If you come back inside of here, what you take note of is that the logo is only taking a small part of this and it is aligned to the left of this whole container. To the right of the container is the menu right here. Now, what we can do to simulate or to recreate what we have inside of here is to ensure that the column on the left only spans as wide as what is contained inside of it. Don't get confused. Let me show you. What I mean is that inside of here, you can select, again, we've selected the container, and you notice here inside of columns here that you cannot define each column one by one. You can either define it as 2 columns or 3 columns like this. But if you want to define what the size of each column is going to be, all you need to do is to click on where you see FR. FR simply means fraction. And this, again, applies to the grid layout right here. Now, what does it really mean? For us to understand, let's click on where we have the FR, that's units right there, and we see there's a small pencil icon just below it. Let's click on that pencil icon and take a look at what we have inside of there. Do you take note that what you have inside of there is 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR? Even though, if we come back inside of the FR unit there, what we have here is just 3. Let's try to add 4. So we have 4 columns, right? That's what 4FR means, technically. Correct? Good. You remember, right? Good. Now, if we come inside of here and click on the unit once again, and then we select the pencil icon again, what we see there is 1FR, 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 1FR in 4 places. Now, what does this mean? That each of the 1FR here just simply means 1 fraction of the entire width of this container. And that makes complete sense because we see that these 4 columns are all equal in their sizes, right? And that means that if we want 2 columns, all we need to do is to remove the last 2FR right there. So we have 1FR, 1FR, and that is 2 columns, right? 1FR and 1FRs. They take equal width based on the size you determine inside of here, right? But it also means that for the second one, if we change that to 2FR, what that means is that the column on the right here is going to take twice as much the width of the column on the right. Right? Does that make sense? Great. Now, because we know that, it means that we can also set this to a different width. If we could change this to, let's say, 3FR, it means that this would take 3 of the fraction of the total width, and the one on the right here would take 2 of the fraction of the entire width. So you can understand that this is just fractions. It's just mathematics. What this simply means is that if the total width here is 5FR, which means 5 fractions, so there's a fraction that are in 5 places, the first place here is going to take 3 of those 5 places. And this makes complete sense, right? So let me introduce you to another one that you can definitely make use of. Instead of writing 3FR, you can write really auto, just like that, auto. And what does that mean? That the children of the first column inside of here, only has an image. But again, it could be a container with a number of items inside of it. It really doesn't matter. The size of the first column right here is only going to be as wide as the element contained inside of it. And that's simply what auto means. Now, if you come inside of here and just type in 1FR for the second column right there, it means the remaining part of it just takes 1 whole fraction, or in other words, take up all the rest of the space except the one that's contained in the first column here. If you want to, and you type in another 1FR here, you understand the point, right? The first one takes up only as wide as what's inside of it, and the other two share 1FR and 1FR. Okay. Now I am beginning to think that I am complicating stuff. Am I? I hope not. And if this is getting complicated, I hope you come back here and watch this over and over again so that you can technically understand how these things work. Understanding this will help you to be able to understand just how you can lay out your pages and build them out the way you want them to. Okay? So what do we need to do to make this work the way we want to? We need to take out the last 1FR here because we know certainly that this is a 2-column situation. So we have 1 column for the logo and 1 for the navigation items, right? Excellent. Now, we also notice something here. In fact, if we come back inside our Figma file, let's take a look at it. You notice here that the navigation items is vertically aligned to this container. So inside of here, you see you have the logo and you have the navigation items. It's right here on the exact same line, vertically aligned. Let's try to do that inside our builder right here by, again, we're going to select the container, not the element, but the container, because as I told you, when you create a container, you can affect the look and the feel of the items within it as a group, right? As a group. So you can do that right now by selecting again that container. And inside of here, you want to align items. You see where you have align items? You can see just by the indication of the icons what you can do with each of this. If you click on align items center here, you see what happens. It moves the navigation item to the center. Clicking on it again will just simply deselect it and take it back to the default. But let's click on that and align that to the center. This is excellent, right? There is something else we can do though. If we come back inside of Figma, you notice that this menu item here, these navigation items are all flushed to the right of this container. So they're far right to the container. Right here, they're all far left to this container. To make that happen, you just need to select that particular widget like that. You need to come inside of style right here. And you need to select the items align. As you can see, if you come down inside of here, you see items align. You can align them to the right just like that. And just like that, they're now aligned to the right. We have our navigation pretty set up for us. So we have our logo right here. We have all our navigation items right here. But we notice that the color of this navigation items isn't that suitable. Let's just hit publish so that we don't lose our changes. Remember to keep saving as you work, right? So now that we've published that, of course, if we made a mistake, we need to come back to a different version of that. We can simply click on the Elementor logo right here on the top left, and we can come back to history here. And as you can see, you have, a number of changes made right here on the page while we're editing. If you've left these for some days and you want to come back and go back to something you've had in previous days, use revisions, which you have right here. And you can simply, select a revision of a certain date. Once you click on it, you click on apply. It goes back in time to that revision. Just a tip for you. However, I digress. Let's stay focused. We need to change the color of these links here. Of course, we can change it on that particular element by selecting that element and of course, changing the link color. If we come down here, of course, inside of style, again, anything that has to do with colors and fonts and, the look and feel, you find that mostly inside of the style tab here. You could find some inside of the advanced tab, but it really doesn't matter. Right now, we're going to talk about that in a bit. But for now, just take a look at what we have down here. You have inside of states. If you want to, you can come inside of here and change the title color of the menu item right here. You see the title color. You can change that by, of course, clicking on this global icon, or you can pick a color manually inside of here. I will not recommend that because then it gets unmaintainable. You want to be able to use variables such as this, like primary, secondary, text, all these colors right here. You want to be able to use them as often as possible so that when you do need to make changes, you change those things from one place. All right, let's move ahead by selecting any of these colors right here. If you select, let's say the secondary color right here, you see it changes just right there. But we do not want to do that. And why? Because if in the future we decide we want to add another element and just, let's drag in a new menu element right here. Let's just drag in, let's say, a mega menu right here. If we drag that inside of here, it really doesn't matter where it is. This is the new one we've added on the right here. It's loading up. We can select the menu item we want. Let's say we want to select the same menu item. What do you notice? The same problem exists again. And then we need to do it over and over and over again. We don't want to do that. We want to ensure that we are able to set up style as global as possible. We only set up styles individually if that is the only option, all right? Because sometimes it is the only option. So instead of selecting this on an elements level, we can just select, of course, let's select that color right there by clicking on the color and just come to clear. We're just going to click on clear and it just clears it out. So it's not setting any color for us on this elements level. So where is it fetching its color from? We're going to click on publish again so that we do not lose our changes. And we want to come back to where we set up our fonts, our global fonts, and our global colors so that we can set our link color. If we come inside of here to site settings, we can select that there. So we're just going to come down here to where we have typography. You can see theme style right here. We want to select typography, and inside of here, you want to select inside of link. You see inside of link here, you want to select the global color for that link. So let's just select that. You can pick a global color of your choice. Let's say we want to pick secondary. We see it applies right away. And if you had multiple hundreds of these widgets everywhere on the site, once you select it here, it changes every single where. Okay. Now we can continue, but we don't want to use that as our color. I don't know if you like that, but I don't know. Well, we could select something like this as an accent color. That's fine. I mean, choose whatever color is on your own color palette. It's your choice. Okay. Now we're going to click on save changes. I just want to show you how I'm building out this page so that you can understand the workflow. And based on that, be able to build a page that looks and feels like what you intended to look and feel like. Okay. Let's click on close all that site settings. We want to come back to the main page here, which we're currently editing, and we want to select that again. Now, we're selecting the main container. And why are we doing this? Because if we come back inside of Figma, let's do that. Inside of Figma right here, you see that there is a lot of space between the top and bottom of this whole container right here, okay? We see there is that much space. We can also make that to happen. And how can we do that? Using what we call minimum height, which I showed you before. Right here, inside of here, you see minimum height. We can select what our minimum height is. You could select this in pixels, but I also do not recommend this. And why do I not recommend that? Because I need this to be able to scale again, up and down, depending on the device you're using. I don't want to have to set the pixel value or fix the value for every single device type, okay? So now, instead of selecting pixels, I'm going to select VH. And what VH means is not too difficult. It simply means viewport height, right? And what that simply means is that, as you can see, this is my entire screen from top to bottom right here. This is my entire viewport. In fact, you know what? I'm just going to click on publish. I'm going to come to the front end here and I'm going to refresh this, okay? So that we can see what we've built so far. Now, our viewport starts from the top right here, just below the address bar, all the way to the bottom right here. So somewhere around the bottom right here, where you have this cutoff that you can no longer see my mouse, that is the end of the viewport. So the viewport is from the top here, all the way to the bottom. That's it, right? So that's the viewport height. The viewport width is from the left all the way here to the right. Okay, that's the viewport width. So you have height, you have width. Now, 100 viewport height simply means 100 of this entire height. You want whatever you select as your container to be 100 the height of this viewport. And what that means is that you could have a phone like this that isn't quite as tall as your computer screen, right? And because you're selecting it in viewport height, it means that whatever 100 VH that you select there, if you select 100 viewport height, it means that on mobile is going to take just as much as the height of this my mobile phone. But it's going to take as much as the height of my computer when I look at the exact same site on my computer. Does that make sense? So instead of using pixel values, which is pretty definite on both mobile and desktop and tablet or whatever device, you want to make use of a unit that will adjust to your device sizes. Always, always, always keep this in mind. It is important that you keep this in mind because that will help you to build very responsive websites. Okay, so let's come back to the website right here and we want to select that container. Once we select that container, we can select what the minimum height of this viewport is going to be. So minimum, meaning that it can expand bigger than that, but this is going to be the minimum. So let's select, let's say 30 VH and see what that means. As you can see here, this is 30% of the height of this entire viewport from top to the bottom right here. As you can see, if you can visually think about it in your mind, you see what's left down below right here is 70%. If you type in 50 VH right here, you see it takes up just half of the top to the bottom of this particular viewport. It takes half. Does it make sense? Good. So in this case here, we want to select maybe something around the range of maybe 15 VH, or let's make that 20 VH, okay? We select 20 VH. That looks just about right. We can, of course, update this in the future, but for now, let's just leave it as is. If we click on publish now, we come to the front end, we refresh this. What do we have? A very nicely done header with our homepage, our about, our contact me page right here. There's one more thing that we missed here. If you come back inside of the editor, normally when a person puts the logo in the header of the template, some people don't like to add homepage as a menu item because it won't matter. And why? Because of the fact that once you click on the logo, you should generally go back to your homepage, okay? So let's select our homepage link right there. We're going to copy it right there from the address bar. We're going to select our logo right here. Come back to content because we're no longer making changes to design. We're making changes to structure or content. So if we come to content right here, we want to select inside of link here. We could select here custom URL, inside of which we can now paste in the URL of our website's homepage. And that way, once we click on publish, we come to the front end, we refresh this. What do we find? That we can now hover over that logo and click on it, and it will take us right back to our homepage from wherever we are on the website. Let's click on that and see what happens. It just refreshes the same page because we're already on the homepage. So we're getting very, very close to finishing this page, don't you think? Well, I don't think so. I think we're far from finishing it. We're super far. But we're slow because you're trying to get the main concepts in your mind. Try to understand the main concepts because when we begin to build the other sections, I'm going to assume you have some knowledge about how these things are laid out because, of course, you should have this knowledge. We talked about it, didn't we? Okay, so let's continue by coming back inside of the editor right here. And once we're done with the header, we can, of course, if we want to, we can come back to the Figma file and begin to build out the rest of this. But of course, you know how it is, right? We're done with our header template. We can come right out of this. We can close it right out and we're done with that. We can begin now to build out what will form the main part of our website. Okay. To do that, we simply just edit the page of concern. For example, right now we want to edit our homepage. So let's just right click and open that in Elementor. Now we want to build out this the way we would if we were working with, let's say, Flexbox as a different layout type, right? We've talked about grid. It's definitely not everything that you need to know as part of building a website using the grid container layout, but it does help you to have, a very, very good start, right? Doesn't it? I trust you, it does. Okay, we can come back inside of the website right now. And what do you notice? Let's just drag the structure panel right down here. And you notice right now you have right here the header inside of here. You cannot make changes to it right here, but you can of course start to make changes to the main aspects of this website. To do that, you just need to, of course, start with adding a container. Once you click on add a container, it's going to ask you for the layout type. Now, of course, you could select whether it's Flexbox or Grid. We, of course, selected Grid before. This time around, let's try to select Flexbox. Let's try to work with that, get familiar with both layouts, and then we can begin to use both of them as we so desire. It wouldn't matter how or what we choose as long as we know that it's going to help us achieve our layout. Okay, so let's select Flexbox this time. Once we select that, it asks us again to select our structure. Now you take note that Flexbox, as I said before, because it's one dimensional, that is, it's either column or row. It's not column and row at the same time. It's one or the other. You have the opportunity here to select as the column, which is that dimension right there. You see direction column. You have direction row as the other option here. You have a number of these other options right here, but just take note, whatever you start with, you can always make changes to this as we move on. So let's come back to our Figma file. Let's see what we have to build here. We see that we have a section with the heading element. I told you before, this is just a simple heading element that's going to say, hey, I'm fiction. And of course, down here is going to say I'm a web developer and whatever. And then on the right hand side, we're going to have the picture of Fig right here. Let's design this. Let's try to make this. Let's be as creative as we can. Walk with me. Let's do this together. We're going to come back right now inside of here. And of course, it wouldn't matter what structure you set. You can build any of this if you want. But of course, to speed up your workflow, just start from a structure that's very similar to what you're trying to achieve. So let's start from this structure here. We're going to click on that. And when we click on that, what do you notice? You notice you have here the main container. Let's pull up the structure panel and take a look at what we have. We have the main container right here. And inside of it, you have two different containers. Now, this is pretty different from how Grid works, and you're going to figure that out in a bit. But for now, we take note that we have our main container here, which we're going to call our hero section because we know that that is what it is. And what's the hero section? It's the main section that you see just after the header. We said that before, right? Did we? Now, I don't even recall if we talked about that. Anyways, that's what our hero section is, okay? So we're going to select that as our hero section. We could rename that by just double clicking and typing in the name there, hero section. That just helps us to have, a visual representation of what we're building out. And so we don't get confused down the line when we see a bunch of containers inside our structure panel and we don't know what is what, right? Okay, so this one, we're just going to call this the container on the left. The container on the left, we're just going to call this person description, something like that. So it should be fine. And inside of the right container here, we could call that person image, okay? And now we see where we're going with this, right? We have one container inside of which we have two different containers right here. Now the main container, which is the hero section right here, is actually, as I called it, a section, but it is not physically right now a section. And to make it a section, we need to come inside of container on the left right here. You see edit container on the left. You need to scroll down, and where you have additional options, you need to select the HTML tag of what? Of section. And why do you need to specifically come here and select section? There are at least two reasons. Reason number one is because of the fact that Google and other search engines kind of understand your page when it's grouped in sections. So they know this section is about the introduction to the person, which we call a hero section. the section below it is about the blog posts or something else. They need to be able to understand how content is grouped. You need to have multiple sections on the page, physical sections by coming inside of HTML tag and selecting sections that will categorize these items and tell the search engines, hey, all of these things are part of the same general idea, right? So this is why you would want to do this. Now, once we select HTML tag as section, we can now begin to add items to these containers. But keep in mind, as with the grid container layouts, you can determine how the children inside of that container, for example, inside of hero section right now, is going to look depending on what you set at the parent level. So for example, if you come to hero section right here, you see you have a number of things that you can set. You can set the width here. So let's say you drag this and you say, this should be only as far as 500 pixels. Then it's going to be as wide only as far as 500 pixels. You can select that there. As with everything else, once you highlight and click backspace or delete, it's going to remove that and return it back to the defaults. The defaults that it is, of course, fetching from the global site settings. You can also, just like inside of the grid container layout, select the minimum height here, and whatever minimum height you set will affect the height of this section. We can come down here to where we have items. You see you can set things such as the direction. You can set it to be row. As you can see, you can only select either row or column, which is vertical, right? So the items are stacked top to bottom as against how grid was working. You remember when you added one thing to grid, even when it was stacking right to left, it just collapsed to the next line and continued like that. It doesn't work like that in Flexbox. You have to determine whether it is row or whether it is column or whether it is row reversed or whether you want the column reversed, which is the first at the top will become the last at the bottom and the last at the bottom will become the first at the top. This is pretty much how this works, right? We're going to work with that and we're going to see how all of this play together. But for now, let's put it at row horizontal because by default, this is how our layout is supposed to look. So let's select the first container inside of here and we want to come here, come to add element and we want to drag in a heading widget. And the heading widget here, we want to physically select the HTML tag of H1. Now let's pause here for a bit and you need to understand something. This is a tip you need to absolutely keep in mind. On each page, you need to have only as much as one H1 element. That is the main title of the page. Whatever is going to be the main title of the page, that is what your H1 is going to be. You can have as many H2s as possible, but just one H1 per page. So every single page is just going to have just one H1, right? So the HTML tag here, you select that as H1. You can definitely, if you want to, in fact, if we duplicate this and leave it as H1, nothing is going to stop the page from working. In fact, if you publish it, you come to the front end, you view this, you're going to see it laid right here in the front end for you to work with. But that doesn't mean that it is the correct way of working. And if you want to understand this, there are AI tools to help you understand it. All you need to do is just search how many H1s are ideal on a web page and why should we have just one H1 on the web page. And you're going to get answers concerning this. There's a lot to uncover here, so let's just proceed. Okay, just one H1 on the page, as many other heading elements as you want, whether you want H2s as much as possible, put them on the page. H3s, H4s, but just one H1, okay? So let's delete the second element right here. We're just going to click on delete and we have that removed. So we have our H1 here ready to be used. We're just going to call this. We want to set what our heading title here is going to be. And in this case, we just want to write web developer and designer, you know, something like that to be able to tell who this person is. Web developer and designer. Now that's okay. That's pretty descriptive of who this person is. If we come back though, and we take a look at this, we take note that we have two lines here representing the fact that you need to write in maybe a block of text that's going to describe this person some more. So maybe I'm just going to add inside of here a text editor, which is going to allow me to add text. So here I could write something like, hi, my name is Fik, but you can also call me Sean. Then I'm going to write, contact me for your web development needs. I didn't spell development right, so I'm just going to right click and select development. Good. So that's it. I have callouts heading right here that tells who this person is and what the website is about. And then I have down here a description of who the person is. Now on the right hand side here, where we have the container, the second container, you can see it inside of the structure panel right here. We want to be able to add the image of this person, this so-called fiction, right? So we're going to do that. We're just going to click on add element and we're going to drag in the image widget right here. Now inside of here, what you really need to do is to click on choose image. Now once you choose image, you're going to come inside of here. Of course, you can pick from your media library if you have the image already uploaded, but I don't. So I'm just going to click on upload files and I'm going to click on select files. And I want to pick the file that I have previously downloaded or prepared to demonstrate here. Once I click on this, you see you have this image of fiction right here, and we can click on open to upload that image. However, this is the point where I'm going to teach you some very good web design skills. Instead of just selecting an image and clicking on open to upload that image, you need to be able to check things about that image. But for now, let's just do the wrong thing and just drag the image or upload it by clicking on open. Now, once we click on that, what we notice is that this image is uploading and it's uploaded that image. Let's see what we can determine is the resolution, the physical size of that image. And we'll think about it in relation to where we need this image to be placed, right? Now, let's take a look at that image. This image of Sean here, you see, first of all, it's 2 megabytes. And you may be thinking of it right now that 2 megabytes is actually not that big of a deal, but it is, and it adds up very, very fast. 2 megabytes is a huge file for an image. You need to take your time to reduce this to kilobytes, right? You need to make it as small as you can before you upload it to your website, okay? Now to do that, I have different tools that help me to do that, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Now, also take note of the physical size of this image. You notice it is 1024 pixels by 1536 pixels. That is a huge image size. And why do we know that that is huge? If we select that and we click on select, what do we notice? That it is meant to only take up this width. Here, inside of edit container, you can see it right here. It's a very clear image, no doubt. But you see it right here, that it's supposed to take the width of this container right here. Let's just click on publish, okay? Let's click on publish. Let's come to the front end and let's refresh this. This is excellent that this loads up just fine. We're going to talk about the styling in a bit, but we see fiction looks very, very happy, and that makes us happy too, right? Let's right click anywhere on the page right now and just click on inspect. And we want to see how much space that this actually does take up, right? And then see how much data we're loading in and why it makes no sense to just load a very large image on a regular device size such as this. So you can click on this icon right here. This icon is going to help you select any element on the page. Again, don't be frightened by the code here. We're not too concerned about this code. What we need to be concerned about is just how much space this takes up. So let's click here on this select any element and just hover until we find, of course, we can find it right here. This is the container that is holding that element inside of it. We can just click on it. And then once we do that, nothing happens, take note, but we can, let's drag this open just a little bit like this. And we could come inside of computed and look at this. Look at what the resolution or the space it is taking up is. It is taking up 550 pixels by 825 pixels. That's how much space it actually is taking. 550 pixels of width. But we're loading in an image. If we click on choose image again, we can see we're loading in an image of 1024 pixels. That is almost twice, if not more than twice, the value of or the size of that image that you actually do need on the page. It makes no sense on 2 counts. One is what I just said. It's using up space that it actually doesn't need. And 2 is the fact that when the pixels are more, the file size also becomes more. And what does that mean? You have a slower website and you also use up the internet bandwidth of whoever is going to be looking up your website, right? Because they have to download all those files to their browser once they load up your website. Save the earth. Don't waste things, okay? Now, we know that we need to adjust this. So what do we need to do? We need to go to a website. There are many websites that do this, but this is my own favorite. What I like to use is a website called Squoosh. Now, I don't even know how to spell it. Squoosh app. Let's just search on Google and we'll find it. Okay, there it is. That's squoosh.app. This website is free and you can use it to reduce the size so that it's exported in both the best possible resolution and also the best possible file size, okay? So let's do that. We're just going to drag in that image. If we come inside of our file manager right here, we can just drag this in right here. And we can take note right now and immediately that we have this right here. And you can take note that on the left, you have the original image. On the right, you have the optimized image. You see the optimized image here has a background of black, but we need it to not have a background because this is how we want to design our website to be. So if we want to do that, we need to change the file format of this to something that supports an image without a background. JPEG or JPEG, as some people call it, does not support transparent background, right? But we need the transparent background. So we're going to use something like WebP. So let's just select WebP right here. And we see that one has no background. But what we take note of right here, if we just take note at the very, very bottom right here, we see the actual size, 2.49 megabytes, right? And on the right, you see a 91% reduction. Once we change that to WebP, that it's now at 217 kilobytes, right? That's pretty small. A 91% reduction. That's very good. Saving the earth. Good. We could now come to resize. We could come to resize here. And inside of width, we could adjust the width. And we know, judging by my own computer, which has a width of 1920 pixels in resolution, that it cannot use more than 550 pixels thereabout. So to be safe, we could put something like 600 pixels as the width. And as you can see, there isn't much changes visually here. But you see, now you have a 97% reduction, which means this is now an 81.9 kilobytes file as against the 2.9 or 2.49 megabyte file. If you drag this around just to see what changes or what adjustment this has made, you will not notice anything visibly here unless you begin to zoom in. When you start to zoom in, you take note, of course, you can see right there that there is a difference in each of these files. And that is true. But this is not how big the image is going to look on your website. It's going to look very, very normal, just like this. So there is no need wasting all of that resolution. You can now download what you have here by just clicking on download, and it takes that right to the download folder in WebP. And that is an 80 kilobyte file ready to be used. We can come now inside of the home page right here. And again, we could delete this permanently. Of course, we can just do that by just clicking on delete, and it deletes that from the media library. Sometimes it glitches where you've deleted something, but it kind of looks like it's still there. Don't worry, it's just a regular known bug. Once you refresh, you would not find that image right there. What you need to do now is just drag in that image that we just downloaded. We've optimized this. We're ready to upload it. We're just going to select that. It's WebP image, which is usually very, very small in file size. And you can see right here that the actual physical size of this image is 600 pixels in width. And that's good because if we click on select right now, we notice the image. Wait, is it loading? Yeah, it's loading. Good, it's loaded. Now, as you can see, you notice there is no difference between what was there before and what you have here right now. Good. Now, that's just some tip for you to consider. Just keep in mind as we go through other aspects of building this website, I am not going to focus anymore on image resolution or optimizing images. I'm going to assume you know what you're doing, okay? We want to select again this image right here. And we want to come inside of style right here. And once we're inside of style right here, we want to select and define an explicit height. Okay. So we're going to set inside of here. We want to turn to the height. We want to select RAM And inside of here, we want to select maybe what, 15, or is 15 okay? Maybe let's make that, maybe let's make that 20, just like that. And inside of width, we want to also select rem and make that 20 right here. Now, what do you notice? You notice that the image expands and is definitely out of proportion. It doesn't look good anymore. It looks like it's squeezed, a squeezed fiction. All right, so let's try to fix this. Let's try to make this image look the best. We've set up a width of 20 rem and a height of 20 rem. Now, I just want to show you how you can adjust this to look very good, even when you explicitly decide what the width and the height is supposed to be. Now it's squeezed, so let's just come inside of where you find object feet here. You want to select cover. Now, when you select cover, do you notice what happens? The image comes back to how it should look. It looks very, very good, except the part of fiction's head has been cut off. A part of the lower body has also been cut off. So in order for us to select what we need to see within the width and height that we have explicitly set, we need to just come inside of object position right here, and we need to select one of the object positions. Right now, it's selecting center horizontally and center vertically. We need to be able to set it vertically to the top and horizontally to the center. And that's what top center means. So vertically, it's going to select it to the top, and horizontally, it's going to keep it in the middle. Just like that, you're able to position this element or this image in a way that makes sense. Now, what I see is that this looks a little too small for what I intend to design here. So let's just adjust this to about 25 rem in height and in width. So it's 25 rem. This looks absolutely okay. The fiction right here looks gorgeous. This is good. Now we can, again, vertically align this by just simply selecting the parent container and then vertically aligning all of the items right there by coming inside of align items, which you see right here inside of items, which determines what or how the items inside of that container is going to look, remember? So we're going to select that and come inside of align items and click on center, and that just moves everything to the center of the page right here. Now you also take note that these two containers side by side are actually almost touching each other if they're not already doing so. This is the end of the first container. This is the beginning of the next container. They're kind of like touching each other. We don't want that to happen because we want to kind of like have more space between these two containers. And now we introduce you to yet another concept. There are things called padding. There is something called margin, and there is something called gap. Now I need to be able to differentiate what each of these do so that you can very well understand how it works. Now let's talk about, first of all, margins. How do margins work? Are you ready? So let's go ahead and see how margins work. Let's select this element just below here. This element that says, hi, my name is Fik, and all of that. If we select that element inside of there and we come inside of advanced right here, we see you have margin. You also have padding. Now, let's see how margins work. If we decide, of course, you can link values together using the link icon right here, which means that whatever you add, let's say you add 2, that 2 is going to affect all of the places here. The top parts of the margin, the bottom, the right, the left, just like that. It's going to affect all aspects of it. But if we highlight, we remove that, we can also unlink it by just clicking on that icon right there, and we can specify what each of these margin values are going to be. Again, we don't want to set these as pixels. Let's instead set this as rem. So let's say the top margin here should be 4 rem, which means 4 times 16. So whatever that is the value in pixels. Do you notice what happens here when you select 4 rem as the top margin of this element? It pushes this other one up. Let's remove that and see what happens. Now it comes back together. Let's put 4 rem again at the top there. You see what happens? It pushes that element up. So margin is the space outside of an element. Right, the space at the right of an element. Margin bottom, the space at the bottom. Margin left, the space on the left. Now, what about padding? Let's remove that, and we're going to make use of this as we go on, but let's first get the principles right. If we, of course, the principle applies the same here. Let's change this to rem. And once we change that to rem, we can also unlink it so that we can begin to set what the values are. Take note of the border box once we select this. Of course, this border box is just to help us. You can see this purple border thingy here that just helps us to select or to know what element we're currently editing. Take note of what happens when I set a padding value of 4 rem like I did before. You see that the border box expands and it doesn't just push the element up. Let's remove that from padding and take note of what happens when I add that to margin. If we add that to margin top here, you see it doesn't expand that border box. It expands only the space outside of that element. Now, let's come back to padding and see what happens when we put 4, the space within that element. So what it means, therefore, is that while margin is the space outside an element, padding is the space within an element. So as you can see right here, you can set the padding of 4. You can also, if you want, select a margin of 4, and you can see that pushes it 4 rem up. It also within it pushes it 4 rem inside of that particular element. Okay, now let's remove that because we don't need that currently. 2 concepts we've discussed. We've discussed margin. We've also discussed padding. We said margin is the space outside an element. Padding is the space within the element. So even if it is something like a container, such as this, we can, if we want to come to advanced, we want to select here, maybe let's say rem on the padding. Let's use padding for this case here. Want to select rem padding here. I want to unlink it so that we can then select the padding, what that padding is going to be. And on the right, which is to the right of this whole container element right here, we can select, let's say, 4 rem. And do you notice what happens here? It restricts it so that there is some space inside of here. If we increase that to, let's say, 7, you see it also increases it. If we increase that to, let's say, 10, you see it also increases it some more. So the space within the element is padding. The space outside, margin. Keep that in mind because that's going to help you in your design. Now let's remove whatever values we have selected there. We want to link it back and delete so that it returns back to exactly the way it was before now. And we need to discuss yet another concept. The last concept that we're going to discuss here on this particular spacing issue right now is gap. And what does gap mean? Gap means the space between, not just outside or within, but between elements. And that means, therefore, that gap is usually set on a parent container element, an element that contains other elements inside of it. That's where you set your gap. So let's say, for example, you come to this container, the container that has this 2 inside of it, this one container and another one. Let's come to the parent container right now. And when you come down here, you see what you have as gap. Now you can see you have column gap, which is the gap between the column. If you think about this as columns, right? You can think of gap as the space between that column. So if we select that, let's change that to rem here. And let's say that we want to unlink it. It's already unlinked. And for the column, let's say we want to select maybe 12 rem. Do you notice what happens? Not only does this moves too. Because why? The gap between this and this is what we set as gap inside of here. So while it doesn't just affect space outside an element or space inside an element, it affects the space between elements, children elements. That's why you need to select or specify a gap on the parent container. Is that understood? Just leave a comment in the comment section below saying I totally get it. Good. Shall we go on? Let's remove now the gap that we have inside of there. We're just going to take that gap off. And what we have now is, of course, again, these elements hugging each other. So what gap are we going to add between these 2 elements? We just need to add inside of here maybe 8 rem. And that kind of like gives us the gap that we're trying to aim for. This already looks very, very good. We can click on publish right now. And once we publish that, we can come to the front end and see how things are looking. This looks very, very good. So we have the title here, we have some text, and we have an image right here, ready to be used. Now let's come back to our Figma file. Inside of our Figma file, we see that the next section here has maybe a line here and some text that says something. And this should be a heading that will tell you what's inside the rest of this. But let's just see how we can try to build out a layout that looks just like this. We can now add inside of here another section. This time around, let's use grid to do this. And why? Because look at that. This looks very much like grid, doesn't it? And in this section, I'm going to show you another very good use of grid right here. You want to see? First of all, let's see how many columns that are generally needed here. We see this is one column. We see this is another column right here. So it means very, very easily we can tell that 2 columns are fine. We can also tell that there is 1, 2, 3 rows right here. So that makes also very complete sense. We can come back now, and if we want to, we can select those 2 column structure right there ready to use for us. Let's begin now to add our elements. To add our first element, we can add maybe the divider element. The divider element just helps us put something like a line on the page right here. As you can see inside of Figma, you can see the align element right there. We can use that one. We can just reduce the width. You see, we have the width set here in percentage. We can reduce it to be this. And right there, you see you have line elements ready to be used. This is very close to what we need, so that's fine. Below that, let's say we want to add a heading widget. Oops, that heading widget went to the next column. So how do we group elements together? You know it, right? Great. So in case you don't know, it's just container, which we're going to put right here. You can see when you put that container inside of there, it just moves other things, to the right and to the bottom. That's how grid works. Now you want to drag inside of here, you want to drag in that one, that's divider widget right there. And you also want to just below it, drag the heading widget right there. Now it's just one container that's inside of the very first grid cell, which is what it's called, right? The very first grid cell is holding a container that further holds other items. Now, keep in mind, I have not mentioned this before, but I should mention it now, that when you have a grid, for example, this, which is grid, the container inside of it can be also grid if you want that. You can come to container layout now, this container itself, you can make this one to a grid, and you can specify inside of here, how the grid is going to be. Or you can keep it as Flexbox, which is by default, okay? So it means that Flexbox and Grid can work together. You can put some grid inside of Flexbox. You can put Flexbox inside of Grid. This is completely up to you, depending on your own design situation, okay? So now we have this one. We see there is some space at the top, at the bottom. We can come to style here. We can just reduce that gap right there, okay? We can reduce that gap. That's at the top and the bottom. We reduce that. And we come back to content. We see we have just that line there. And inside of here, we have a heading to be entered. Now, by default, this is H2 and not H1. H2, you can have as many as you want. Now, inside of here, we could call this, what do we call it? Let's say projects or something, something to be able to show what this person who claims to be a web developer and designer has actually worked on in the past. So now that's there. The next thing is we want to add another element. Let's come back here. We see that we have multiple projects that this person has showing up here. Now I'm just going to upload a bunch of these images to show the projects, and then we can go ahead and work with this. To do that, let's just add a simple image widget anywhere here. Of course, that's fine because it's going to enter that on the very next grid cell. We're going to select the image. We want to click on choose image. And once we click on upload files, we can click on select files, and we can just select all of the elements or all of the projects that this person has worked on in the past. We have 5 items here. We can just choose maybe the 5 of them or maybe 4 of them. It really doesn't matter what we choose here. But let's just add all of these images. We're uploading all of them right now. Again, optimize these images before you upload them to the site. Also remember to add an alt text so that a person can understand what each of these elements means for a person who is using the site. A person using an assistive device can understand it. search engines will also understand it. So remember to do just that. I'm not going to talk too much right now about the resolution or about optimization of the images. We're just going to go right ahead to making use of these images. So let's select the first image right here. Once we select that, maybe this one is the image we select. Select this one and click on select. Now we have that first project right there, a screenshot of a web page that this person has worked on. All right, great. Now that we have that, we also would want to maybe write a little about what this project was about. So maybe this project was titled Right Protection or something. Let's just add a heading widget. Once we add that, we see it goes to the next grid cell. You're just going to come inside of add element, click on container. Let's add the container inside of here. And then we're going to drag that image inside that container and also drag that heading widget right there inside the same container. So let's just select that heading that we just added. Of course, we have H2 here, which is, of course, defining what we have in this section. And by the way, why didn't you remind me? This is a new section. So we need to select that section element there. We need to come down here to additional options. And inside of HTML tag, we want to select section. So that's a new section. You must do that. Remember, okay? Now we want to come inside of the heading here. This cannot be heading 2 because it's part of the same section. In one section, we have a heading 2, which is like the main heading for that section. And other headings inside of the same section should, of course, be heading 3. So we're going to select that next heading here and select heading 3. And you see it's a bit smaller, but it's fine. Okay. Now we want to, inside of here, just give this project a title. The project, we may be calling it Monter. Okay. Maybe Monter is the name of the brand that hired this web designer to do this job. So we're just going to call that Monter. Now, what happens when you duplicate this? Once you duplicate, you notice what happens here. The entire container right here is duplicated. We can now begin to make changes. We can select this one, choose a different image, maybe this one right now. Select that inside of here. We want to call that Neymar. Maybe that's the name of the person who hired this. I don't care. We just want to have that there. Let's duplicate this again. And we now have another one inside of here. We will need to select that image, change that image to something else. Maybe we change that to this and we select that. Want to give this a name. We call that maybe Railway as the name of that project right there. We duplicate this one more time and we have the final project right here, which we're just going to pick from our media library. We're going to call that, I don't know what we're going to call it, but let's just maybe call it, I don't know, Samer. I don't know what that name is. Okay, so that's all of the projects that this person has worked on. Keep in mind, this is not the most optimal way to do this. When we go to the following lesson, I'm going to talk about just how, in lesson 4, how you can ensure that this is done in the correct way. For now, I'm only showing you how to lay things out if you have to lay things out this way. In the next lesson, I'm going to show you just how to make this dynamic so that you don't have to manage this on a per page basis. If that's getting complicated, don't worry about it. We're going to talk about that in the next lesson. But so far, we've gotten somewhere with the layouts that we're trying to achieve. If we come back to the Figma file here, we notice that there is no element actually on the right of this particular first container right here. So how can we make that so that it also applies to our page? We can come back here. We want to move this one to the bottom here. You may think right now that the best way to do that is just to drag it right here and, just put it right here. Okay. And instead of that coming right here, you see that the one that was here just returns back there. So it won't work like that, okay? Now, the best way to do it, let's just Control Z here so that it returns back to the way it was, is to make sure that the first grid cell, which is the first container that we have here, spans the 2 columns. And by default, this is how grid works. The element that was inside that container or that particular grid cell before will simply move to the next available grid cell. So to make that happen, let's select this first grid cell right here, which is the container that's contained in that grid cell. We want to come inside of advanced and where we see grid item, because every item inside of grid, every item that is a direct child, for example, that's uncollapse, if that's a word, all of this right here, okay? Now you see all of these items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all of them are grid items inside of the grid parent right here, okay? So if you select that first container right there, you can see if you check inside of advanced that you would have this new grid item right here. And that's because, of course, this parent is a grid. If you select the parent and change that to Flexbox, forget about how messed up the design looks right now. Just focus right now on the first child of that particular container. If you select that child and you come inside of advanced, you don't see grid item right here, do you? No. You need to come inside the parent and ensure that that one is in a grid layout, right? And then you need to select this first child here and span that. If you come inside of advanced, you can come to column span here and make that to span 2 columns. And just like that, the first grid cell spans 2 columns. The one that was previously in the second cell here has now moved to the third place, which is technically now the second cell. So that's how grid works. And this is just another way to work with and apply CSS grid. Now you have this setup right here. You can click and publish. Let's take a look at how this looks in the front end. You can see here we have projects. We have this number of projects right here. Let's come back inside the design here. We notice that these elements, this divider element right here, because the width was set in percentage, it now looks too big because now the parent element is spanning, a bigger space. So 53% is now, a bigger size, right? So we can also reduce that. We can reduce it all the way down. Something like this should be fine. I don't know about you. What do you think? This looks okay to me. We can now move on to the next sections. Before that, maybe we should just give this a nice background colors. Let's just select this image element right here. We want to come inside of advanced, come down here to background, and we want to select a nice background color for this. This looks okay. It just kind of gives it some sort of personality. We can also add, if we come inside of border here, we can add a solid border. We can come inside of border type. We can select solid. There are other border types here. Play around with it. See which one you like to use, but I'm going to select solid and just show you how this looks with a solid border. You can see how it looks. The edges are very, very sharp and squared. We can select maybe, let's say 5 pixels here so that we can increase that boldness of the border so that it looks, a little more thicker than usual. And then we need to also adjust the corner rounding of this element so that it's not so sharp in the corners right here. That corner rounding inside of CSS and inside of web design in general is called border radius. You can see it right here inside of here. You can adjust the color. Let's first change that color to maybe something like this. And then we can adjust the border radius. Maybe we can just come here and select rem. And we want to select that as 1 rem. And now this just gives it a very nice looking border right here. Once we click on publish, let's come to the front end. Let's see how this looks again. If this looks okay, and if it actually does look okay, then we know we're good to proceed. It looks absolutely all right. Now we can come back inside of our editor here and we can keep on building the other aspects of our website. We can come down here and go right to the next section. We can see the next section here is just 2 columns right here. And on the right, we have a number of items. For this, instead of using grid and having to set the grid column like we did before, we could use Flexbox. Remember, you can also do this in grid. You can do this in Flexbox. I'm just trying to use both of them so that we all get very, very familiar with styling stuff inside of grid and Flexbox. Is that understood? Did I lose you at any point in my description of how to build out this page? Let me know in the comment section below. Okay, now we can go ahead to the next section. The next section here is just a section that looks just like we completed just now. And then it has inside of here something about what this person wrote, maybe blog posts. And then you have maybe a title of, let's say, blog. And then you have all of the blog posts listed here and maybe a button at the bottom that takes the person to the page where you can read all of the blog items. Okay, so let's try to build out that layout. We can come right here and just click on layout and just select, of course, Flexbox this time. And we can do a 2-column layout this time around. Now that we have the Flex container added to this page, we can select that container and we can then begin to add elements to that container. Of course, we want to also add, what we added here before, this particular divider widget right here. It's pretty hard to select since it's very tiny, but you can also, remember, select it from the structure panel on the right. And you can come down here and you can just paste that inside of here. We want to come inside of projects here. You want to copy that. You want to paste that inside of here too. Of course, that's difficult to select, so we can also select it from the structure panel right here. Right click and paste. I hope you are renaming your stuff, because just looking at container everywhere, this is not healthy. But we need to build this fast during this tutorial. Okay? Now we have that inside of there selected. Now inside of the second container here, we can begin to build out how these things will look. For this shouldn't say projects. This should say my writings. And then on the right hand side here, we could add in widgets, simple heading widgets like a H3 like this. Remember, the one we added before was a H2. This one will definitely be a H3. Inside of here, this one is going to be blog. And I have forgotten something. Do you know what I've forgotten? If you know what I've forgotten, let me know in the comment section below. What have I forgotten? I have forgotten to select inside of here, after adding inside of here the container, I have forgotten to add the HTML tag of section. So you want to do that. You want to remember to do that whenever you add in a new section. Okay. Now we have my writings, we have blog, and inside of here now we want to add all of those blog items. So let's add a new container. We're going to click on add element, and inside of this container, we can add another container inside of there where it's going to now, add all of our blog items. So if we come back here to where we have the pages and posts, let's come back to the WordPress site here. We see we just have one blog post called Hello World, right? We could pull that in, but for now, let's just keep things simple and just put in the title of the post here and also a little stuff that will serve as the description of the post. We will discuss that in the following lesson. For now, let's just proceed to add in a new element here, which is a heading widget. Remember, you've added one H2, you've added one 3. What's the next heading going to be? Of course, it's going to be a H4 right here because it's a subheading. It's a subheading of this particular H3 element. Now inside of here, we could type my blog post title or whatever the blog post title is going to be, right? And then we also want to add what is going to be the description of that blog post title, all inside that container right there. And now we can leave that as is. Let's just assume that's the description of that particular blog post. But you would notice something right here, that this container appears to have some padding inside, because if you hover over it right now, you notice that it has some padding already defined by default. We want to remove that. So we want to come inside of advanced and come to padding here and put that as 0. And as you can see, all of the padding inside of there is completely removed. We're okay with this padding right now. We'll talk about that sometime in the course of this course. But for now, let's just leave this as is. So let's come back to our Figma file. We have our title, we have the description, and I don't know what I meant here, maybe read more. So we could add a button here that's going to say just that. Another button inside of that same container that's just going to say read more. Now, why is the text of read more not showing until you hover? Because you remember that we selected what the color of all our links are going to be. And the color of our links turned out to be the same color as the color of our button. So now the whole button text has disappeared. To fix that, let's click on publish. You want to not adjust the color on a singular basis or adjust any style on a singular basis. As long as that style exists as a global style to be edited, do edit it as a global style. And that's going to save you a whole lot of time in the future when you do want to make changes. Let's come back to site settings right now. And inside of site settings, we're going to find out what the button color is going to be by default. And inside of buttons here, you can see theme style, you have buttons. When you click on button right now, let's scroll a bit down so that, okay, we're already at the bottom of the page. You can take note of the button right here. Let's try to change the text color right now. change the text color. Instead of just, picking the text color right here, as you can see, picking the text color is changing the color right here. But we don't want to pick that manually. We want to use the global colors that we have already set. Reason? So that when you do change it once, it changes everywhere. Let's select global color right now, and we could select here inside of here, white. We don't have white as a global color. So let me introduce you to another new concept inside of Elementor. You need to select, first of all, let's select white. And once we do it, instead of just saving this as the color, we're instead going to add a new global color using the plus icon here. I've showed you the function of clear. I've showed you the function of color sampler. The function right now of create new global color is what I'm showing you. You can pretty much set up the color anywhere on your site and create a global color from there so that you don't have to go into site settings and then go into colors and then change the color there and then come back. You can create it on an instance basis if there is a new color introduced while you are designing. Okay, let's click on create new global color. And now we just want to call that global white. And we're going to click on create. Generally speaking, you don't want to name your variables the name of your colors, because that means that if the colors change, then you need to change the names too. So you need to name it something generic like primary, secondary, something like that. Just ensure that you name it something that works for you. Okay, now let's proceed now by clicking on Save Changes. Now, once we click on Save Changes, we notice that the button right here is carrying the new color that we've just selected on a global basis. We can close site settings now after that is saved so that we can come back to our page that we're currently editing. Let's proceed now with trying to design what the rest of the page is going to look like. So what we have so far right here is my writings, and you have this blog post right here. If we right click and duplicate this, what do we have? We have all of the blog posts shown right here. They're actually not the blog posts fetched from anywhere on the site. They're really just, as we said before, templates. For now, we're just putting something on the page. We're going to talk about fetching them in the next lesson. Okay. Now, most of the elements you see here are too tightly spaced. We need to space it out so that there's some more breathing room here. But what's the best way to do it? Will the best way be to select the container here and then come to advanced and come to margin and maybe change that to rem, unlink this and set a margin top of, let's say, 5 rem to space this out? Let's say maybe that's too much. Let's put that at 3 rem to space this out. Will that make sense? Is that the best course of approach here? As you notice, changing that here is only affecting these particular elements that we're editing, just this container alone. It's only changing the margin of that one alone. And it means we need to therefore go inside of here and also change the margin here and come inside of here and change the margin here. And that's too much work. Apart from the fact that it's too much work, it gets very complicated when these elements have to scale down to a small device size. So generally speaking, you don't want to do that. What you want to use is the other concept that I have previously explained to you, which is called gap. You need to, of course, set the gap on the parent element. And the parent element is what? Is the parent element the title here, or is it the container holding all of them? You guessed it right. It's the container holding all of them. So let's select that container, and we want to come inside of layout here. And of course, we want to select the gap. We can, of course, come inside of here, select it as a rem value, and then we want to change that to, let's say, a value of 3 rem. And as you can see, that just gives a gap between this. Look at it again. If we change that gap to maybe like 6, do you see what happens? It gives that gap between all of the elements that are children elements of that particular parent element. Okay, so let's give the gap something that makes sense. Let's say 3, and this gap looks just all right. Now we can click on publish. Let's take a look at what we have in the front end. If we come down here, we see that we have this. Okay, this looks okay. Now that we have that done, let's go ahead to build our last section. I'm pretty sure that you have at least been introduced very clearly to Flexbox and also to Grid, and you kind of understand how each of these things work. So I'm not going to bore you with going to build the other sections. I'm going to give that as a take-home assignment for you. This is your homework. You need to go ahead and build the remaining sections. But for now, I'm just going to add one last section to this. And the last section I'm going to add here is one section that's going to help me contain my form. So inside of here, I'm going to copy my first element there, which is my divider. I'm going to paste that inside of here. And then I'm also going to paste in the heading, which is going to be a H2, which is, of course, inside of this section. I'm going to come down here to advanced options, the additional options rather, and I want to select HTML element and select section because that is a new section I'm dealing with, right? Great. Now that I have that selected, I want to be able to add here. As you can see, this is a space for me to add a form. This is a space to take information that the site owner, the web developer, Fiction, wants to collect from people who come on the site. We're going to add a space right there for the form. But we're not going to deal with the form right now. We're going to do that sometime in the future. For now, we just want to add another element that will stand in place of that form. We're going to talk about that in a future lesson. Now let's just add a placeholder for where the form is going to be. I'm just going to drag in a text editor widget right here and just say the form of the website goes here. Something like that should be fine, okay? Now, once I type that in, I could, if I want to, I could highlight this and position it to the center. If you don't see these tools right here, you know this is the toggle toolbar that toggles it open and close, right? So when we toggle that open, we can select center to align that text to the center. We can also come to advanced here and come to padding. We can select here rem and maybe give it a padding of like, 12 rem, and that should be okay. And we now want to give it a background. We can stay in advanced, come right down, come to background and give it a background of maybe, global background color right here. Inside of my writings, I could here just say contact me. Something like that should be fine. Now, this is where the form is going to go. We're going to definitely talk about that and the building of that form sometime in the future. But for now, we're done with building this web page. Except that there is something you would notice if you're paying good attention. If you come to the front end here and let's just refresh and see how things look in general. If we scroll down, we have a decent looking page here. Nothing too fancy. The page isn't cluttered. But what we notice is that the gap between each of the sections, for example, the end of the project section is here, but the beginning of the blog and my writing section is here. It kind of like is too close, right? So let's come back inside here to the structure panel. If we just collapse all of it, we can use this to collapse all of the items all at once by simply just, collapsing like that. Good. Now, we can notice that we have all these items. This is the first section. This is the second. This is the third. This is the fourth. The fourth here is, of course, the contact section. I could just very, very quickly rename all of this section. Inside of here is the project section. I could rename that to projects. And then inside of the section below it, this section right here, once you click on it, it scrolls to this affected section. This is blog section. That should be okay. And then we have down here, it's the contact section. So we're just going to call that contact section or simply contact if we so desire. Now we have all of that set up. Now you see you have all 4 sections here. Now, what did I say about having to specify a gap between elements? That you need to go to the parent element and specify that gap, right? But you see, these are parent elements themselves. So in order to give an even gap between each of these section elements, we need to put all of them inside one container that will serve as their parent element. And to do that is pretty simple. We can come to the top right here. We can click on Add Container. We can click on this Add Container option right here. We can select Flexbox. We can select a column layout because that's how the sections flow, top to bottom. Makes sense, right? Great. Now, for this one, we're not going to select the section elements. Of course not. This is just going to serve as a container, something to help us to be able to specify the gap between all of the rest of these elements here. So we're going to call this main. That's what we're going to call it. Now, the HTML tag we're going to specify here is what is called main. We're going to select main right here. Now, main simply means that this is the main part of the website. Simple as that. And it carries all of the sections right inside of it. we could start to try to drag each of these elements right here inside of that main section. But for some reason, that is not going to work. But what is going to work is that we can right click, we can copy, and we can start pasting it inside the main. So we just right click on the main and click on paste. And now we have that section right inside of there. If we click on that container of that section, we come inside of additional options, we see that is still a section. So it makes sense. Now that is inside the main. We can now delete that one that we've already copied. We can come to the next one. We can right click, we can copy, we can come inside of here, right click. We can repeat the same steps by simply deleting that project section right there. Come to the My Writing section. We can right click, we copy that. We come all the way up to the main section, or we can just select on the structure panel on the right here, just right click and paste, and that's just going to enter inside of the main right here. You can see it right inside of there. Now you can right click on the blog section and you can very easily delete that from there. You can also very easily right click on the contact here, copy, you want to right click on the main and paste. And now that enters into the main container right there. You can delete that last contact section right there, and all of your main sections are now inside a main HTML tag container. Does this make sense? Now, can you specify a gap between all of these section elements? Absolutely. You can select the main here. You can come inside of here. You see container layouts is Flexbox. You can come down here to where you have gap, and you can very, very easily specify the gap. I could say that the gap here in rem should be something like what? Give me a number. Let's say 6 rem. Okay. So we can select that gap as 6 rem, and that should be okay. Now we can click on publish. We can come to the front end here, and we can definitely refresh this. Now, once we refresh it, we see that the gap between each of these elements now is a very, very nice gap for each of them. Each of the section here is inside its own section HTML tag, and Google, other search engines, including screen readers for people with assistive devices, are going to know how to use this just fine. Okay, now that we're done with that, we have one last thing we're going to do. We need to build out our footer. And how are we going to build it out? Are we going to do it right here on the homepage? Absolutely not. Our footer is a template. It's going to apply to more than one places on the website. So we need to apply this as a template. So let's come back here to where we have the homepage. We're just going to edit the dashboard right here. And inside of the dashboard right here, we want to come inside of where we have Crocoblock. Again, we could come to templates if we have the Pro license of Elementor Pro. Absolutely use that if you're comfortable with that. It works pretty much the same way. It's just Crocoblock has better features. Now, if you come inside of Crocoblock right here, you can see here you have Theme Builder. Once you select Theme Builder, it's time for you to select what your footer is going to be. Again, just as you did for the header, this is something you can also do for your footer. Now, inside of here, you have your header. Inside of the footer here, which is the one at the bottom here, override theme footer, you see it right there? Great. You can just click on create new template. We're going to select Elementor again. Inside of here, we're going to select site-wide footer. Something like that. It's fine. We can now click on create. Once we click on create, the template is created. We can go to the editor now, and the editor is loaded. Let's come back to the design we have here and see how we structured our footer to look like. You remember how we're going to do this, right? Do you? I hope you do. Good. If you remember, all you need to do is to add in a new, whether it's Flexbox or it's Grid, choose whatever works in your own case. In fact, I would advise you that when you try to build a layout in Grid, try to build the same layout in Flexbox, see what works for you, see what's possible, see what's not, so that you can sharpen your senses to be able to make the decision on the fly, whether you're going to use Flexbox or whether you're going to use Grid to design your layouts. Okay, now I'm going to select the first container right here. You can see that's the container right there. You see that you have inside of here, you have a logo, which I have previously specified with this wireframe. And you also have some text, and then you have a button right here. So let's try to build a layout just like that. But first, you notice that all of these appear to be grouped inside of one kind of container element right here. and then the one below inside of another kind of container element at the bottom. Let's add the first container right here. We just want to click on it and drag in container, or we can click on it. It's still going to add that container right there. We select the parent again and click on plus and click on container, and it adds the next container below. Now for the parent, we can give it a minimum height. Again, we're just going to use VH here so that we can specify a view height. And now we can drag the slider and just kind of eyeball what we're trying to achieve. We see 60 VH kind of looks what we're trying to achieve inside of Figma, and that should be fine. But you notice that the two container elements are aligned to the top. You want to align them to the middle by using the justify content option here. Let's justify the content to center, and you see those two containers are aligned to the center. And that's very good. And now you see they have some sort of gap between them. Let's also make that gap happen. We can do that by again selecting the parent element. We want to come down here and we want to select the gap. We can select that gap as maybe 5 rem, something like that. Is it okay? I'm not too sure. Let's put that at maybe 3 rem, and that should be fine. Eyeball this, design this the way you want. As long as you're not giving explicit values by a UI designer, you can of course play around with the values that you have here. Okay, now in the first container here, we have the logo and we have 2 elements, some text and a button. So let's just very quickly add that. Just come back here and just grab the logo, and we can put that right inside the footer. We're going to edit the header template, take out the logo and just put it here. In the meantime, we want to add inside of here a text widget, just like that. And we also want to add a button widget inside of here. So let's just drag in a button widget that says maybe something like contact me. Remember, when you add a button widget, you also want to add what the link is. So you're going to add that link inside of here. This is okay for now. As you can see right here, inside of here, what you have here is the text flushing all the way across just like this. You can specify an explicit width for that particular element. You can come inside of advanced right here, and inside of width, you're going to select here custom, which is going to give you the opportunity now to select a custom width for this particular element. And here you can, of course, if you want to, click on this pencil icon and type in manually what you want the width to be. If you say you want the width to be 50 pixels, you're going to just write 50px. If you say you want it to be 500 pixels, you can just write it right there. And that should be fine. However, as you remember, we're not going to be using pixel values. We're going to be using it as sparingly as possible, because when you use pixel values, it is not responsive. What that means is that pixel values do not adjust to the user's settings on their device. I talked about this before. I hope you remember. Okay. Now, instead of pixels, we're going to use something called CH, which means character. So a number of characters that you want in one line. Okay. So in this case, I'm just going to specify, maybe I'm just going to say I need only as much as 40 characters in one line. Okay. And so I'm going to select there 40 CH, 40 characters in one line. That makes complete sense, doesn't it? Good. Now that we have that, we can now come back inside of our header here and grab that logo. We can come back inside here and just paste that logo inside of here. We can adjust that. We can bring that all the way up here. Now, after you add the menu item right here, what you want to add next is that copyright statement. So let's just add a simple widget, probably just a heading widget. And I want to use this opportunity to show you just another concept right here. Let's just drag inside of the structure panel so that the menu comes before the heading widget. But you notice inside of HTML tag right here, you can change this to P, which means paragraph, right? So even though you use a heading widget, you can always change this, whatever it is, to an actual paragraph. And this should be fine for us, okay? But you notice it's, going to the top somehow, okay? You want to select the parents as we did before so that you can align both items at the same time, selecting the parents, and you want to come down here to align items and align both of them to the center. And now you see both of them are kind of on the same line in the very center. Now, you want one element on the far end to the left. You want the other element on the far end to the right. Another Flexbox concept here is what you see inside of justify content. You see space between. Once you select space between, you kind of like use up all of the space between. Instead of specifying a gap, it kind of says, hey, just go as far to the left as you possibly can, and you will also go as far to the right as you possibly can. If you have another element here, let's say you right click and duplicate, you see it just adds a space between all three elements. And that's pretty much how this space between works. Now we can right click on any of these elements that we want to and just remove them or delete them. We can use the delete option right here. Once we click on delete, we have that second element to the far right. Now inside of here, we can just very simply specify our copyright symbol and say fiction right there, 2025. I don't know. However you want to put that, you can put that however you want to. But keep in mind that right here, where you have this menu item right here, you can change this menu item to a footer navigation. This is the main navigation we have right now. I need you to do one last assignment for me. Tell me right now below this video, how would you create a new menu item when you need to create that for the footer section? Just tell me how you're going to do that, and I'm going to tell you whether you're right or whether you need some additional instruction. All right. Now we have all of this set up. Let's pretend that this is the correct menu for this place, and we can click on publish. Maybe we want to make one last change to the footer section. We can select the entire section right there. We can come to background type right here. We can come to color, and we want to change that color to the global background color right here. Something that makes it look a little more, fancy. We can come now to the front end. We can refresh this. Let's see how things are looking. If we scroll all the way down here, we see our footer is very neatly done for us. And also each of these links go to the different places that we've specified on our website. Now, this looks okay for me. It's clean and it kind of like says what I need my website as the fictional person that I am to say. How do you want your own website to look? So here is the challenge. I need you to share screenshots of how your website is looking based on the designs that you have achieved by following this exact tutorial. All you need to do is go to the Crocoblock community, go to Facebook. You're going to find the community link in the description below. Just go to the community and give us a hashtag. As you can see right here on the screen, this hashtag, you want to put that inside of the community and say, hey, this is my attempt to build it following the course. And I'm going to come right there. I'm going to look at what you've done. I'm going to tell you what you've done very well. And I'm going to give you a thumbs up however you perform. Now, just before we round this off, let's talk about what we've discussed so far. We've talked about how to build a header template, how to build a footer template, and how to design the main parts of a website page, right? You've talked about using sections, using Flexbox, and using Grid. I want you to please take note of how these things work because they're going to be foundational to building whatever we build in the future, all right? Now, that means, therefore, that this lesson is completely done. And what it also means is that the next lesson is going to come with even more goodies. What we're going to be talking about in the next lesson is content structures in WordPress. And what that simply means, you're going to find that out in full detail. We're going to be covering concepts such as post types, taxonomies, terms, all these other concepts that is going to be foundational to your understanding of how to work with dynamic content inside of WordPress. All right, guys, this was a very long one. I hope that you take the time to leave a comment down below, leave a thumbs up, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel if you've not already done so. As always, my name is Tobi Salami. This is the end of this lesson, and I'm going to see you in the next one. Take care.